Hello everyone, welcome to the TheGeoecologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on physical geography as well as human geography of late. So in this session on human geography, models and theories, we are going to discuss a very interesting theory that pertains to class consciousness, and that's about Marxian population theory. Now remember, when we say Marxian population theory, it comes from the ideas of Karl Marx, who was a German philosopher, a German economist, who talked about class consciousness in the society, class conflict in the society, and also talked about the population in terms of surplus population. So how this surplus population is created and how this politics and policies of capitalism lead to this overpopulation in the society and can also be in future hazardous for the society. These things are the premise of this particular theory that we are going to learn today. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and do share the videos with others as well. So now, let's learn about this Marxian theory of population growth coming from Karl Marx ideas. So Karl Marx, who was a German philosopher and founder of modern communist theories, modern communism as we say, remember his ideas were influenced from the great scholars like Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, who were great social reformers and thinkers of their time. So his theory of population was not a theory as such that we study, but basically some ideas related to population growth which we consider as the theory of surplus population. Right? So he himself never advocated a theory or propounded a theory, but we take out this theory from his major works on Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, which is his pioneer work in terms of the interpretation of the communism, the society of that particular time period, in especially Western Europe, the industrialized society, the capitalist society. So Marx is also regarded as father of communism, and these two books, the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital. Now look at the time period, 1848 and 1867. This is mid of 19th century and industrialization and industrial revolution was heading towards its peak. So what was happening? The large-scale industrialization was leading to capitalistic mode of productions in the society. Capitalism was inherent part of the development during these ages. That's where the ideas of parallel to capitalism or anti-capitalism or the ideas based on socialism started to propagate and be propounded by various scholars. So Karl Marx was one of the great scholars who talked about the class conscious society, about the inequalities because of the capitalism in the society and several other things, in which this particular idea where you see the capitalistic mode of production, where human society develops through class conflict, where one class is called bourgeois, which is ruling class, and also the working class, the labor class, is called the proletariat. Now remember, the bourgeois and the proletariat he was talking about is basically two aspects of the same society. One is the exploiter, the other is exploited. One is the owner, the other is the worker. So this kind of relationship is important to understand this particular theory of population growth, where the surplus population is the key factor. So he did not separately propose any theory of population. That is an important point to remember. But his surplus theory of population growth has been deduced from his theory of communism itself. Right? And he opposed and criticized the Malthus theory of population. That's also an important point to consider. So if you have not watched the previous video on Malthusian population theory, go to the playlist and definitely watch that theory before learning this theory in details, because this is kind of criticism of what Malthus had to say. Right? So if you look into the Karl Marx's work, it is criticizing the capitalist economy and has a different idea or different viewpoint for population growth. For Marx, the social problems were not fault of the poor workers. Rather, it was part of the capitalistic system who was exploiting these poor people. Right? That was important. So Marx made his scientific interpretation of human history, which is also known as historical materialism. Remember, in geographical thought, we have already talked about historical materialism, Marxism. So, he said, just like there are scientific explanation of physical phenomena, physical geography, there are some scientific explanation based on historicity of the social phenomena as well. Right? So he said that essence of history is change in the modes of production in any society, and this change is always progressive. So modes of production was the most important topic in historical changes that have come across the society according to Karl Marx. So now if you look into the Marxist population cycle in this image, what you observe, labor class increase their population in hope of increasing their family income. The economic theory of fertility, which later on we learn about it as well. What is this? In poor societies, the idea is that if there are more children, they would grow up and earn for the well-being of the family, welfare of the society, right? That's how the idea of money or the idea of this thought of being wealthy is dominant on the basis of more population. Right? So increase in population is the next factor, subsequent increase in population, flood of the labor supply in the market. And if there is increase in population, if there is flood of labor supply in the market, what would happen? Just think. Industry society further exploit that labor class because of surplus labor. So if you have too much of labor, the cost of labor will go down. That's the whole idea. So industrial society captures more resource and left no resource for the labor class as well, because profit maximization is the basis. And then further, and what you can see here is poor gets poorer, no increase in family income at the end of the day. So what is this vicious cycle? This is basically vicious cycle of poverty. From poverty to more poverty to more poverty, the society keeps going, while the other aspect of the society, the other part of the society keeps getting richer and richer according to Karl Marx theory. Right? So this is where you have two different classes emerging in the society, and alongside which one class of the society, which is rich, always has lesser population, while the poorer community, who even don't have subsistence to survive properly, even then they keep producing more children in the hope of getting that wealth someday. Right? That was the idea of Marxian theory basically. So if you observe here further, in this cycle, poverty cycle, Marxian theory of population growth, what you see? Surplus labor leading to decrease in real wage, then again increase in number of hands, decrease in wages further, less income, again going to poverty, and from poverty, need to increase more hand comes to the picture. So when from poverty, the idea of producing more children comes to the picture, it is predominantly economy dominated, right? So growth of population starts to happen, and that's where you have again the surplus labor. This vicious cycle continues in this capitalist societies according to Karl Marx. So Marx considered that the society, especially feudal society, industrial capital society, have two major economic classes, the rich and the poor. The rich own it, the means of production. Right? And they keep exploiting the poor, while the poor are people who sell their energy, their work for these rich people, right? In exchange of wages. And eventually these wages also go down because of surplus supply of labor. So employers can earn profit by exploiting the poor, and this profit is known as the surplus profit, the concept of surplus profit. And according to Marx, now this is important statement, in no country of the world population increase on account of fertility. Remember, Marx completely negated the idea of increase of population on the basis of fertility increase. Rather, he said it increases only on the account of capitalist policies and choices of people that are made on the basis of these policies. Right? So it was predominantly the idea which was economic in nature. So the poor population cannot nourish their children on account of their poverty. Thus, what do they want? They try to increase the population by reproduction so that the next generation would also help them to generate extra wages. This idea is still prevalent in many underdeveloped countries of the world. You can see around the world and you can check for examples yourself that which countries you find these examples suitable. But however, due to the increase in advanced technology and excess laborers, now remember two things are happening in industrial society, in capitalist society. Technological advancement is also happening, and as well as the same time excess laborers are also coming in. Right? So technology is also playing a role of cutting down the labor at the same time. So what happens? Labor becomes cheaper and cheaper. right, in such condition, according to Karl Marx. So what happens? The surplus population and unemployment is generated in this situation, and this is the main cause of unhappiness, the misery, right? So he came to the conclusion that main causes of surplus population were nothing else but the wrong policies of these capitalists whose only motive is to generate more and more profit for themselves, not the welfare, not the social welfare, right? So Marx was on the view that socialist society, reproductive behavior would develop a complete harmony between individual and society. So he promoted socialist viewpoint in terms of reproductive behavior as well. According to Karl Marx, if the society was more of socialist, the reproductive behavior would be in accordance with the harmony between individual and society. There will not be more disparity. The disparity levels will come down, right, according to Karl Marx. So Marx suggested for a population control fall of capitalism is the only mean and distributive justice. So if there is capitalism in the world, there will never be this social justice achieved, according to Karl Marx. So he said that if state controls over the resources, it can mitigate the food crisis. That is the only situation, right? So that's where it's important to understand the basic premise of socialist society rather than capitalist society being the main driver of equality among the people, among the population, and controlled population growth. Otherwise, it would always lead to a surplus population, according to Karl Marx. Therefore, what we observe, his theory is the socio-economic model of population growth based on historical materialism, historical data of how the developments according to the historical circumstances, the factors have taken place, how the modes of production in the society have led to this particular scenario of population growth. That was important here. Now, if you observe the criticism of Marxian theory, what is the basic criticism? Remember, Marxian theory emphasizes on socialist structure of the society to be actually friendly with the individual and society situation, friendly with social justice delivery, right? But remember, increase in population does not necessarily lead to decrease in wages actually. Why? Because there are many socio-economic factors which are also responsible, not just one factor of labor supply in actual situation, if you observe. So population growth does not necessarily happen due to decrease in wages, but also is important on various other facilities like medical and health facilities, housing facilities, educational facilities, right? Which was not taught in Marxian theory. Then theory of Karl Marx is applicable where? In terms of application, if you want to talk, it is only applicable in purely capitalistic societies and not in other societies, not even in mixed societies, right? That's what is important. So Marx did not consider the health facilities in terms of its role in increasing population. And also, remember, due to trickle-down effect, now this word itself is important, that trickling down from a center, the development goes to the periphery, right? From one developing center, the technology gradually travels, right? So that's important. So due to trickle-down effect, today's poor population is also benefited. It's not a clear-cut divide. Yeah, but definitely it takes time. So it means Marx was not completely right in his sense, right? That was an important point in criticism. So according to Marx, the higher the wages and lower the birth rate. It means this is a reciprocal relationship being propounded by Marx. But does it happen like that always? No, there are other factors as well. For example, faith and religion can also be one significant aspect. Medical and health facilities can be also a significant aspect, which was not considered by Karl Marx in argument for his population growth. That was important here. So, what you observe, it is true to a great extent that in capitalistic society, there is a surplus population on account of unemployment definitely. But not to presume one thing here, that under a socialist system, there will be no need to check population growth at any stage. It does not mean that socialist system is the best fit system. It will not have problems, isn't it? So this is what the one-way analysis that Marx did, that X is the function of Y. Only one-way analysis. It was not dynamic analysis. That's why we say it was a deterministic model on the basis of economic determinism. That's why we say only applicable in power and class struggle systems. Only in those society where you have divide clear-cut there. right? That's what is important. So even in communist countries, population growth is checked, if you can observe around the world, isn't it? In erstwhile USSR, factory workers were provided with contraceptives, that is the example in their factories, to control the birth, right? So if economic inequality is the main cause of birth rate, then these countries' rate should not differ. But what is there? If you see the countries where you have these particular societies which are basically of the socialist nature, of communist nature, those countries also have this particular population policy in place, right? That's why it says that Karl Marx theory was kind of a one-way analysis, but it is definitely applicable in parts, not as a whole. That is important point to remember. So power and class struggle based deterministic model is what is this? Marxian theory or Marxian model of population growth. So now, when we have discussed in details the Marxian theory of population, the surplus population, the class conflict and class conscious society, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking on other models and theories in human geography. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep watching.